Tonight, I'm sharing 5 stories that will make you question the next time the lights flicker. The first one comes from a woman who lived alone in a city high-rise during a blackout. And by the end, you'll understand why she never takes the elevator after dark anymore. This account comes from Naomi, 27, who was living in a downtown apartment complex in Philadelphia. She had moved there for work, one of those post-college jobs that promised more stability than it delivered. The building wasn't new, but it was nice enough. 20 stories with a glass lobby, a handful of shops at ground level, and 2 elevators that were temperamental even when the power grid was stable. It was early autumn when the blackout hit. Naomi remembered because she had left her window cracked, and the air smelled faintly of smoke from people burning yard debris in nearby neighborhoods. Around 9 p.m., the lights blinked once, twice, and then snapped off. The hum of refrigerators, televisions, fans, all of it drained away, leaving a silence so heavy she felt it in her ears. At first, she thought it was just her apartment. But when she leaned out the window, the entire block was dark. Street lamps, traffic lights, the neon diner sign across the street, all dead. Only a faint orange haze lingered on the horizon from another part of the city still lit. Her phone buzzed with alerts. Citywide blackout. Stay inside. Naomi sat on the couch, scrolling until the battery ticked lower, then decided to head downstairs to see if anyone in the lobby had news. She grabbed her flashlight, slipped on sneakers, and opened the door to the hallway. Other tenants were peeking out too, whispering to each other. Transformer blew. It's the whole district. Could be ours. The stairwell was already crowded with people heading down. Naomi joined them, the air thick with body heat and nervous chatter. But when they reached the ground floor, the lobby was empty, eerily so. The security desk was unmanned, the glass doors reflecting their flashlight beams back at them. Then someone noticed it. The elevator. Its doors slid open with a cheerful chime. The interior was lit, humming faintly, as if untouched by the blackout. The group fell silent. One man muttered, "That's not possible." Someone else stepped forward, peered inside, and quickly backed away. Naomi stayed behind them, hugging her arms. She knew the building didn't have a backup generator strong enough to run elevators. It barely powered the emergency lights, which were flickering even now. The doors closed. A moment later, the elevator dinged again. Opened. Closed. The floor indicator above it flickered. 3, 7, 12. It was moving. A woman whispered, "Who called it?" No one answered. They stood in the lobby, watching the floor numbers tick up, pause, then descend. The elevator stopped at the lobby again. Ding. The doors opened to an empty car. Someone laughed nervously. Glitch! Power surge or something. But Naomi couldn't shake the sense that the car was waiting. That night, she returned upstairs by flashlight, heart pounding. She couldn't sleep, kept listening for the faint chime of the elevator through the concrete walls. At 2:14 a.m. the night before, her front camera had snapped a blurry photo. She didn't remember touching it. The photo showed her apartment door, taken from the hallway. She never used the elevator again. Before you go, if you were in a blackout and saw an elevator moving on its own, would you step inside or take the stairs forever? Tell me in the comments. Your story might be featured in a future video. Subscribe and ring the bell for more stories like this. I post new ones every day. The second story comes from a man who stayed at his cousin's farmhouse during a storm, and by the end, you'll understand why he refuses to go near basements during blackouts. This account comes from Drew, 24 at the time, who had gone to Vermont to help his cousin Ryan settle into a newly purchased farmhouse. Ryan had bought the place cheap, 2 stories, weather-beaten clapboard siding, a sprawling wraparound porch, and a barn that leaned a little too far to the left. It had history. Ryan liked that. Drew thought it had more secrets than charm, but it was only for a week, and Ryan had promised him free food and beer for his help. On the third night, the storm rolled in. It started as wind rattling the shutters, then came rain hammering the roof so loud it drowned out the television. Drew sat on the couch, half watching a rerun, while Ryan tinkered with an old oil lamp he'd found in the attic. "This place is going to need everything redone," Ryan muttered. "Wiring, plumbing, probably the roof." "Guess that's what you get when you buy a house older than both of us combined," Drew said. Ryan just grinned. At 9:46 p.m., the lights blinked. Once, twice. Then darkness dropped over the house. The television went silent. The hum of the refrigerator cut off. Even the heater stopped with a sudden, hollow sigh. "Power's gone," Ryan said matter-of-factly, already reaching for the flashlight on the counter. Drew hated the silence that followed blackouts. It wasn't just quiet. It was thick, as if the walls pressed closer, listening. He shifted on the couch. "How long do outages last out here?" Ryan shrugged. "Could be a couple hours. Could be until morning." That's when Drew heard it. A faint rumble, low and steady, rising from beneath the floorboards. "The generator." Ryan's face brightened. "Told you I got it hooked up. Should kick in for essentials." Sure enough, a moment later, the kitchen lights flickered and steadied. Weak, but enough to cut through the shadows. Relief spread across Drew's chest. He'd been bracing for hours of nothing but flashlight beams. They cooked a late snack, moved around the kitchen. The glow was strange, brighter in some corners, dimmer in others, as though the house hadn't quite remembered how to distribute light. He didn't question it. Anything was better than pitch black. But then Ryan stopped mid-bite of his sandwich, listening. "Do you hear that?" he asked. Drew frowned. "The generator?" Ryan nodded slowly, his brow furrowing. "It's loud. Too loud." Drew paused. He realized Ryan was right. When they had tested the generator the day before, the sound had been muffled, barely audible upstairs. Now it was sharp, distinct, vibrating through the floorboards. Ryan grabbed the flashlight again. "He's checking." Drew followed reluctantly, his feet dragging. The basement door was off the kitchen, old wood with a brass knob rubbed smooth over decades. Ryan pulled it open, and cold air puffed out, damp and earthy. The stairs groaned as they descended, flashlight beams cutting across stone walls slick with condensation. At the bottom, silence hit them. The generator sat in the far corner, unplugged. The cord coiled neatly, just as it had been yesterday. Dust clung to its casing. It hadn't moved. But as Drew's light swept across the walls, the hum returned. Faint, then swelling. Not from the machine, from the stone itself. Both men froze. Ryan stepped closer, pressing his ear to the wall. I saw his cousin's hand tremble against the damp stone. "It's inside," Ryan whispered. The hum grew louder, deep enough to vibrate their ribs. Drew's flashlight beam quivered in his grip. He backed away. "Let's go upstairs." But Ryan didn't move. He kept his head against the wall, listening, his face pale. Drew tugged at his arm. Now. As they turned to leave, the overhead bulb flickered on. Both men froze again. The light wasn't connected to any working circuit. The grid was down. The generator wasn't running. Yet the bulb glowed. Bright, buzzing faintly, casting jagged shadows across the basement. They bolted up the stairs, slamming the door behind them, their breaths sharp in their throats. The hum followed. Even upstairs, Drew swore he felt it. Through the floorboards, faint but present, like a machine running directly beneath his feet no matter which room he entered. For the rest of the night, every lamp in the house burned steadily. The TV flickered on and off. Even the ceiling fan in the guest bedroom turned lazily, despite no power running into the house. Drew sat upright on the couch, wide-eyed, watching the shadows stretch unnaturally long across the walls. Around 3 a.m., the storm tapered off. Rain softened, wind died. At 3:14, the lights in the house cut off all at once. Darkness reclaimed the rooms. The hum ceased. The silence that followed was worse than the sound. By morning, the neighborhood power returned. The lights flicked on again, normally this time. Appliances beeped awake. Everything looked ordinary. Ryan brushed it off, muttering about bad wiring. But Drew couldn't shake the memory of the humming in the walls, vibrating through his bones, or the moment that bulb had turned on above them. Within a year, Ryan sold the farmhouse. He never explained it to Drew, not fully. And Drew, well, he hasn't gone into a basement during a power outage since.
The third story comes from a family who thought they were the only ones awake during a power outage, but a single candle burning across the street made them realize they weren't as alone as they believed. This account comes from Margaret, a mother of two who was living in a quiet New Jersey suburb at the time. The street was one of those comfortable cul-de-sacs where every house looked like a cousin of the next. 2 stories, vinyl siding, trimmed hedges, garage doors facing the road. Most of the families knew each other, traded pies on holidays, nodded during morning walks. At 9:30 one spring evening, the neighborhood lost power. It wasn't the first time. The grid in their area was fragile, and Margaret had learned to keep flashlights and candles ready in the kitchen drawer. Her husband lit 3 candles on the dining table, while their kids giggled at the sudden darkness like it was a game. The night was warm, still, with no wind to stir the leaves. The silence outside was total. No traffic, no hum of distant TVs, not even a dog barking. Just the faint scratch of candle wicks burning. Margaret went to the window, curious if anyone else on the block had lights. As expected, the row of houses across the street sat in perfect darkness. Every porch light was out, every window blank. Except one. The house directly opposite theirs had a single candle burning in the upstairs window. A steady golden flame, visible even through the glass. Margaret frowned. The house had been empty for months. The Johnsons had moved to Florida, leaving it on the market. She knew for a fact it hadn't sold yet. The real estate sign was still in the yard, leaning slightly in the grass. Her husband joined her at the window, saw the same glow, and muttered, "Maybe a realtor showing? Someone staying overnight?" "Not without power," she said. "And who shows a house at 10 o'clock at night?" The kids asked what they were looking at. Margaret lied and said, "Nothing." But she couldn't stop watching. The candle flickered steadily, then wavered as if someone had carried it across the room. The flame shifted from one window pane to another, slowly, deliberately. Her skin crawled. Her husband said, "Probably a reflection. Has to be." But she had already noticed the light wasn't random. It was moving room to room. Over the next half hour, the candle traveled across the upstairs windows. It would vanish, then reappear in another window, as though someone were walking the halls. Margaret tracked every step, heart pounding louder each time it vanished. Finally, the flame descended. She saw it glow in the downstairs living room window, then the kitchen, then the foyer, always moving slowly, like a ritual. She wanted to call the police, but what would she say? That she saw a candle in a house she knew was empty? At 11:12, the candle reached the front window by the door. And then, it went out. Darkness swallowed the house. Margaret exhaled, realizing she'd been holding her breath. She told herself it was nothing. Some prank, maybe squatters, maybe kids, something explainable. She tried to sleep, but at 2:31 a.m., she awoke to the sound of her son's voice. He was whispering, "Mom? Why is there a candle on our stairs?" Her blood turned to ice. She bolted upright, heart hammering. "What did you say?" "In the hallway," he said, pointing. Margaret crept to the bedroom door, opened it a crack, and froze. At the bottom of their staircase, visible in the darkness, a single candle flickered on the first step. The flame bent and swayed, though the air was perfectly still. She shook her husband awake, but by the time he scrambled to the door, the flame was gone. The house smelled faintly of smoke, as though wax had just burned. In the morning, the power returned. Everything looked normal. No sign of a candle, no drops of wax, nothing to prove what they'd seen. Across the street, the Johnsons' house was still dark. The realtor's sign leaned in the grass, unmoved. Margaret swears to this day she can't walk past a candle in anyone's home without feeling her throat tighten. And she never opens her curtains during a blackout anymore. Before you go, if you saw a candle moving through an empty house across the street, would you keep watching or close your curtains? Subscribe and ring the bell if you want more stories like this. I post new ones every day.
This one comes from a tenant whose building lost power, and her intercom kept whispering her name anyway. By the end, you'll understand why she won't answer a buzzer after dark ever again. This account comes from Megan, 30, who had been renting a one-bedroom on the 4th floor of a pre-war walk-up in Queens. The building had a small tiled lobby with mailboxes that stuck, an old brass intercom panel by the door, and a super who was friendly until anything electrical broke, at which point he shrugged and said, "Old building." The apartments were small but had tall windows and real plaster walls, and Megan loved it for that alone. She freelanced as a translator, worked odd hours, and kept a tidy routine. Coffee at the window around sunset, headphones while she worked late, a midnight cup of tea to mark the end of a shift. The power went out on a Wednesday in July, a hot, airless night when the heat sat on the city like a blanket. She knew the blackout had spread beyond her block because the skyline beyond her street was a flat silhouette. No windows blinking, no rooftop red beacons, no echo of television light across the interior courtyard. From somewhere on the avenue, a grocery store alarm wound up and then fell, an exhausted mechanical howl that made the darkness feel heavier. She lit 2 candles and a squat battery lantern she kept under the sink for storms. The apartment looked suddenly old, shadows in the picture frames, book spines turning into blocks, the ceiling molding in high relief. She texted her neighbor across the hall, Liz, "You good?" and got a thumbs up. The super had taped a note downstairs. Con Ed says few hours. Do not use elevator. There was no elevator, which everyone read as a joke, until they realized it was a copy and paste note from another building. Around 10:30, the heat had settled into a kind of truce. Megan cracked the window to the air shaft for a little air. Warm darkness breathed back. She boiled water on her tiny gas stove the old-fashioned way, flame hissing blue, kettle handle wrapped in a dish towel. The city had its own soundtrack in a blackout, distant shouts and laughter from people on stoops, the occasional radio drift, a bicycle whirring past like a fly. She set her tea by the window, sat on the arm of the chair, and listened to a city that had forgotten how to hum. That was when the intercom clicked. It was a small sound, almost polite, a relay somewhere in the building engaging for half a second, click, and then letting go. She froze. The intercom panel inside her apartment was mounted by the door, square metal with yellowed plastic buttons and a tiny speaker grill. It was wired to the brass panel in the lobby. When the power was out, the whole thing was dead. She knew this because the super had told her twice during previous outages. No buzzers. You want in, you call up or wait. It clicked again, then a third time closer together, as if someone were testing it from downstairs. She crossed to the door, half expecting to find a draft making the panel rattle. The metal plate was cool under her fingertips. She put her ear to the grill. At first she heard only the small rushing sound of her own blood and the soft traffic hush the blackout hadn't fully erased. Then, faint, so faint she thought it might be the building itself, came a voice. "Megan." She jerked backward like she'd been shocked. The candle flame on the entry table quivered, then steadied. She stood with her palms on her thighs, breathing through a choir of bad explanations. Heat expansion. Someone in the hall. Her neighbor on speakerphone. The intercom clicked again, a delicate little sound, and the voice came clearer like a radio turned a notch to the right. "Megan." She picked up her phone and thumbed a text to Liz. "Do you hear the buzzer?" Then deleted it because it felt like baiting something. Instead, she typed, "Weird question, is your intercom doing anything?" The typing bubble appeared immediately and then a reply. "Power is out, so no." "Why?" Megan stared at the gray bubble as if it would explain physics. She stood on her toes and looked through the pee-hole. The hallway outside was dim, light leaking under doors, a candle's glow far down by the stairs. She listened for footsteps. Somewhere above, a neighbor laughed too loudly, the release valve on a long day. From downstairs, the brass panel in the lobby gave a faint metallic chirp, an old system announcing its usefulness to no one. Her own intercom clicked for a fourth time. The speaker gave a small breath, and then, too soft to be a prank, came a whisper, lined and static. "I can't get in." She swallowed. "Who is this?" she asked, hating the way her voice sounded to the empty room, to a piece of metal, to herself. The speaker hissed like a seashell. "Let me up." Her thumb hovered over 911. The petty part of her brain wanted to text the super a photo of the panel, "See, your ghost elevator," and demand he explain electricity. Instead, she said, "We're in a blackout. The intercom doesn't work."
Silence, except that it didn't feel like silence. It felt like a person leaning closer to hear whether what you'd said could be true. She put her ear to the grill until the metal cooled her skin. The apartment smelled like warm dust and candle wax. The voice returned, as if picking up where she'd left it. "You let me up all the time." She closed her eyes and tried to place the voice. It wasn't Liz. It wasn't the super. It wasn't any of the regular delivery guys whose tones she could identify because their carrying pizzas up 4 flights gave them a reverent way of saying hello. It was genderless in the way telephones can be, pitched very soft, a thread through the speaker net. "This isn't funny," she said. The apartment's door buzzer button, long disconnected like a tooth in a jaw, ticked lightly in its casing, as if someone downstairs had pressed and held the brass tile with her surname next to it, and the electricity had decided to exist for that act alone. "Megan," the voice said, as if trying different distances from her ear. "Open." She set both palms on the wall to steady herself. Her mind hunted reasons. A battery backup somewhere, some survival current in the building's veins. Or, more likely, less comforting, someone trying to scare her because they knew her name and knew the intercom was supposed to be dead. She cupped her hands around her mouth and shouted through the door, "Liz!" A door opened across the hall. Liz peered out, ponytail messy, phone in hand. "You okay? Do you hear anything? My intercom is—" She couldn't find a good verb. Alive was wrong. It implied something kind. Liz stepped into the hall and tilted her head. The building's sounds came and went like tide. "No, I hear your voice." Her expression shifted from concern to the curiosity people wear when they want a story. "You want to hang out? I have popsicles melting." The intercom clicked again. Even in the hall, they both heard it, an insect of a sound against the plaster. Liz's eyes flicked to Megan's apartment door. "Is that—" "Yes." They stared at the metal plate together like it might blink. The voice didn't come. Megan laughed once, high and tight, and that felt like a capitulation, so she said, "I'm coming over," and grabbed her lantern, locked her door, crossed the hall. Liz's apartment had the same layout, but felt different. Softer lamp light, a rug that turned footsteps into cloud. They sat on the floor with 2 spoons and a sweating container of peach popsicles. The blackout turned into a slumber party for 10 minutes, while they let sugar cool their tongues and told each other the story of the day, as if it could explain the night. Their building made itself known the way old buildings do, settling, a radiator ping from some haunted physics not running at the moment. Outside, someone on the block started singing very quietly, a lullaby that probably comforted someone somewhere. "Tell me the weird part," Liz said, finally, because Megan's knee bounced. "The intercom said my name, more than once, and asked me to let it in." Liz nodded very slowly, then brightly said, "City prank," in the same tone she used to say, "fourth coffee." Megan wanted to agree. The intercom clicked again, through the wall, through the bones of the building. Both women stopped breathing. The sound was so small that it would have been funny if it hadn't been in the wrong world. "Okay," Liz said. "That I heard." They listened for a while longer. Nothing. Liz walked Megan back across the hall with her own lantern, both of them moving with that deliberate casualness people use when they don't want to trigger something superstitious. They stood in Megan's doorway and waited as if for a cat to dart out. Nothing did. "Text me. Anything." She meant, "I'm awake too." She meant, "You're not the only person in this." After midnight, the building seemed to sigh. Candle wicks gave up little nests of ash. The street outside had settled into a Blackouts version of itself. Megan turned the lantern down to save the batteries, laid on top of the covers in the heat, and scrolled through old photos to occupy the part of her brain that would otherwise run the same loop of, "What was that?" until dawn. At 1:06 a.m., the intercom clicked again. This time the voice didn't whisper her name. It said, conversational as an elevator voice, "4th floor."
She sat up too fast. "No," she said to the room. "4th floor," it repeated, as if announcing itself to the wrong stop. Then, as if it had remembered, "Megan." Something in her decided on a strategy. She would record it. She opened the voice memo app, placed the phone on the entry table near the panel, and stepped back. "Who are you?" she asked softly, because it felt like a question the night would ask back if she didn't. The speaker hissed, and then, with the mildest distortion, did something she hadn't prepared for. It repeated her question. Her voice, but thinner, folded back through the grill. "Who are you?" She shut her eyes and let the first surge of panic pass like a wave. "You're copying me," she said. "You're copying me," the intercom said, almost pleased to have learned a game. She put her palm flat to the cold metal and spoke very slowly. "How do you have power?" A pause, then a click, as if someone at the other end had pressed a button. The tiniest high-frequency whine began, the sort the human ear barely registers, but the body dislikes. It reminded her of the old tube TV in her childhood home, the way you could feel it was on in a room even before you saw the picture. The panel gave off a small warmth now, or maybe her hand was warming it. "Open," the voice said. It didn't sound like her own this time. It sounded like someone halfway between floors. "Let me in." She lifted the receiver handset, an old Bakelite piece no one had used in decades. It was dead plastic and weight. She raised it to her ear anyway. The line on the other side was active, but wrong. No hum, just an open space like someone standing very still in a long hall. "Open," the voice said into the emptiness. A new sound entered the apartment. The mechanical click of the building's front door lock trying to throw and failing once, twice. The super had told her years ago that the buzzer upstairs sent a tiny current down to a magnet that released the door latch. No current, no release. Tonight, in a neighborhood without light, the lock clicked as if hopeful. She thought of an IV stand in a powerless hospital, a bag empty but still dripping. Her phone screen pulsed where the memo app was capturing silence and not silence. At 1:13, the voice said her name again. Clean this time, like someone she knew had leaned in close. Instinct snapped something inside her. She grabbed the duct tape from the drawer where she kept cords and spare keys and taped over the intercom grill fast, 3 strips, cross-hatched. It was stupid and ceremonial, and so satisfying her shoulders dropped, as if she built a door over a door. The voice didn't change. "Megan," it said behind duct tape, polite as ever. "Open." She laughed just once, the wrong noise in the wrong place. "No." A minute later, her phone buzzed. A text from a number she didn't recognize. "I'm downstairs. Elevator's out. Let me in." She typed immediately. Wrong building? But her thumbs shook and autocorrect turned it into something too polite to be frightened. The 3 dots appeared. Another text. "Front door stuck. Buzz me." She turned the screen brightness down and watched the message hang there, like bait strapped to a string. She wrote, "Who is this?" The reply was a single word. "You." Her skin prickled from scalp to ankles. She typed with surgical care, "What's my apartment number?" 3 dots. Nothing. Then, 4R. She was 4L. Behind the tape, the intercom said, "Left." In the hallway, a door opened, down by the stairs, then shut very gently, like someone who understood unmarked rooms. She moved through the apartment without turning her head too fast, lantern low, every childhood rule about monsters revised into the adult version, locks, angles, lines of sight. She set the security chain on her door because it made a sound she trusted. She texted Liz, "Are you up?" "Yes." "There's someone in the building or the intercom thinks there is." 2 bubbles this time. "You want me to come over or we call super?" Before she could answer, the intercom spoke again. The duct tape muffled it, but didn't stop it being language. "I can't get in."
She stared at the door, at the chain she could put a finger through and touch her own hall. She imagined someone standing at the brass panel downstairs, pressing the square with her name on it over and over. Long finger. The patience of an animal that had learned to feed her sound. She imagined no one there at all, just old wiring deciding loneliness. She typed to Liz, "Come over, bring your key." The hallway between their apartments had never looked long before. It did now. They timed it like a heist. On 3, doors open, cross the landing, doors shut. Megan's chain clicked back into its groove, and both women leaned against the wood with their full weight, laughing quietly, because otherwise the sound would be wrong. A knock came, very soft, not at Megan's door, but at the intercom panel itself, the way you knock on a fish tank to see if the thing inside will notice. The duct tape gave a sticky inward bow and relaxed. Liz swore under her breath in a language her grandmother had taught her. "I hate that," she said. "What is it?" Megan asked, and realized she had been waiting to say those words since the first click. "Wires, or a jerk, or a weird pressure thing with the door." She didn't sound like she believed herself, but liked the shapes of the words in her mouth. They sat at the small kitchen table with the lantern between them and watched the corner of the room the way you watch a dog in a room when it hears something you can't. The intercom clicked occasionally, as if deciding something and then not deciding it. At 2:02, the building's front lock clicked again, this time with a longer hold, as if a hand had found the magnet and held it in place by faith. Megan stood. "I want to see the lobby." Liz stood with her. "Absolutely not. We don't have to go down, just the landing." They went down 2 flights with lanterns half shaded in their palms to keep neighbor doors from opening. The building smelled faintly of last winter's radiator heat cooked into the paint. At the second-floor landing, they leaned over the rail. The lobby below was square and old. Checkerboard tiles, mailboxes with crooked labels, the brass intercom panel on the wall, dim as a fallen coin. A glow lay on the floor that the lanterns hadn't made. Liz tilted hers away, and the glow remained. A narrow rectangle of weak light where the front door met the jamb, as if the lock weren't fully thrown and the outside wanted to be inside. The brass panel clicked softly again, a reflex. In the stillness that followed the click, Megan heard it. Faint as a story told in another room, the elevator bell from the building 2 doors down. It sounded like a borrowed memory. She put a foot down onto the next step, then drew it back for a reason she could not have named. The front door's lock gave one more encouraging click, and then stopped trying. The rectangle of glow on the tile thinned and disappeared, swallowed by the street's dark. They went back up. At Megan's door, the duct tape over the intercom had a new impression, like a fingerprint dragged across the adhesive side and then pressed firmly back. No, she thought. That was a thought you could live with. The real truth was that the adhesive had warmed and slumped. At 3:14 a.m., as if someone had thrown a hidden switch that included the entire borough, the power returned. A wave of sound rolled down the block. Appliances booting, window units coughing back to life, radios clearing their throats. Light rushed into the stairwell. The intercom panel in Megan's apartment clicked once, businesslike, as if it had been at a meeting called by electricity and wanted to be noted as present. The first thing she did was rip the tape off. It came away with a sound like cloth torn in church. The grill was ordinary metal again, cool and uninterested. She played back the voice memo, expecting to hear her own voice and nothing else. For 34 minutes, the recording held room tone, the occasional shoe scuff, and a murmur that might have been the street. At 1:13:23, a soft sound threaded through, the kind transient engineers delete. The waveform lifted and made a shape like a breath. She turned the volume up, pressed the phone to her ear. The app wasn't great. The distortion was friendly. Under it, a word lived briefly. Left. She turned and looked at her door. Her apartment was 4L. The super's label on the lobby panel downstairs said 4 left in his neat caps. A letter from the bank last week had misprinted it as 4LFT. She screen-recorded the segment and sent it to Liz with no text. 3 dots. Wow, Liz wrote. Then, I hate it. The next morning, the super shrugged. He said, old wiring. Bleed from the phone line. Happens. He replaced the lobby panel's faceplate with a new one, bright brass, too shiny for the building. He did not replace the guts. Those were not on his list. That evening, he taped a new note next to the mailboxes. During outage, do not let anyone you don't know. Megan doesn't use the intercom at night now. When someone buzzes after sunset, she texts first. She keeps the duct tape in the drawer by the door because some things make you feel better, even if they don't make the world change. Sometimes in the soft hour before sleep, the apartment returns to the blackout version of itself in her mind, edges and silhouettes, and she hears, not with her ears, the small polite click of the panel deciding to speak. In that space, she says calmly to an empty room, no, and for reasons she cannot name, it feels like the right word. Before you go, if your intercom spoke your name during a blackout and the lock clicked like it was waiting, would you go down to the lobby or stay behind your door? Subscribe and ring the bell. I post new stories every single day.
The fifth comes from a college student who was house-sitting during a blackout, and what should have been an ordinary night turned into something no outage could explain. This account comes from David, a junior at the University of Maine, who was asked to watch a professor's house on Firefly Lane, a rural road just outside town. The house was modern compared to its neighbors. Sleek siding, tall glass windows, polished wood floors. It sat alone on 2 acres, no street lights, no nearby houses, just woods pressing in like a tide. David wasn't nervous about being alone. He liked the quiet after weeks of dorm noise. The professor had stocked the fridge, left neat instructions, water the plants, check the mail, keep the lights on at night so it looked lived in. It sounded simple, the kind of job where you study for midterms in peace and pocket a nice check at the end. The first 2 nights were uneventful. He ate leftovers, did readings at the kitchen table, slept in the guest room. The only oddity was how dark the area felt. Without city glow, the nights were absolute.
Even when the moon was out, the woods looked like a painted backdrop. On the third night, a storm moved in. He noticed it first in the trees, their tops shifting before the ground-level wind picked up. By dusk, the windows shook, branches scratched the siding, and the house groaned like it resented its own solitude. At 9:12 p.m., the power went out. The silence hit like a hand. The hum of the fridge, the buzz of the HVAC, the faint glow of the digital clock, all gone. David muttered figures and found the flashlight left in the kitchen drawer. The instructions from his professor had mentioned a backup generator in the garage. He decided to wait. Sometimes outages lasted 10 minutes. But 10 minutes turned into an hour. The storm raged on, and the house sat in candlelit silence. At 10:31, David heard a sound that froze him. The house came alive. Every appliance, the fridge, the oven, the washer and dryer, even the ceiling fans upstairs, roared on at once. The dishwasher door banged open. The microwave's digital screen lit and beeped. The TV in the living room flickered static onto the walls. But the lights stayed off. The house hummed like a body with too many hearts beating at once. David gripped the flashlight and walked room to room. The noise was everywhere. Machines whirred, fans spun, the dryer drum turned lazily with nothing inside. He opened the garage to check the generator, half convinced that it somehow surged. But the machine was silent, the cord still unplugged. He returned inside, sweating despite the cold. The TV flickered snow. The microwave blinked 12 o'clock in a stuttered rhythm. Upstairs, the fans turned in opposite directions, blades chopping the dark air. Then, all at once, silence. Every machine powered down in perfect unison. David stood in the kitchen, flashlight beam trembling across stainless steel appliances that had gone lifeless again. His ears rang with leftover hum. At 11:07, the dishwasher door creaked open by itself. David merely dropped the flashlight. He stepped back, heart hammering. The racks slid out halfway, though there were no dishes. The smell of warm plastic filled the room. The oven light flicked on. Its glass door glowed faintly as though something invisible cooked inside. The microwave beeped twice. David whispered, "Stop!" without realizing he'd spoken out loud. And then, for several minutes, everything stopped. The storm outside eased. The house fell into a deep, listening silence. At 11:43, the front door lock clicked. David aimed his flashlight at the door, expecting wind pressure, but the deadbolt rotated on its own, one full turn, then stopped. The handle twitched. He backed toward the staircase. The washer upstairs started its spin cycle. The sound of water sloshing echoed faintly. At midnight, the house breathed. That's how David describes it, a long, low exhale that came from the walls themselves, as if the house had lungs. Every window fogged from the inside in the same instant. He swore the glass flexed outward as though pressed by invisible lungs. His flashlight beam caught condensation dripping down. By instinct, David bolted upstairs to the guest room, slammed the door, shoved a chair under the knob, and he sat on the bed, light aimed at the door, and listened to the house shift. Every so often an appliance would tick or chirp. Once the TV turned on and blasted static for 2 seconds before dying. Once the dryer motor groaned, though the door never moved. Once the dryer buzzer sounded, end of cycle, though it hadn't been running. At 3:14 a.m., everything stopped again. Silence pressed in. The fog on the windows cleared. And when David gathered his courage to check the kitchen,
Every appliance had been reset. Microwave clock blinking, oven light off, dishwasher racks pushed neatly back inside, like nothing had happened. In the morning, the power company confirmed the grid had been down all night. No explanation. David never told his professor exactly what happened. He left out the details, just mumbled something about noisy old house. But he remembers the way the walls exhaled. He remembers how the house had used its voice, and he never goes back to Firefly Lane, not even to visit. Before you go, if every machine in your house turned on during a blackout, what would you do? Tell me in the comments. Your story might be featured in a future video. Subscribe and ring the bell if you want more terrifying stories. I post them every single day. Until then, if the power dies and the silence starts breathing, don't wait around to hear the next sound. Sweet dreams.